Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this session of the Gemini Essentials Bootcamp on GEMS, organized by Adoptex Academy. My name is Rawal, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. For those who are joining us for the first time, thank you for taking the time to join us in this session. Just to give you a bit of context, that this bootcamp is a part of AI capacity building for workforce transformation and digital readiness under the AI Opportunity Fund Asia Pacific, an initiative of AVPN with support from Google and Asian Development Bank. And we at Aptex Hub are the local training providers to execute this project. So today's session focuses on automation with Gemini Gems. In our previous session, we learned about Gemini automation in general, but today we'll be going in the depth of Gems, where you will learn how you can automate smarter with Gemini, mastering prompting techniques, and how you can boost your productivity. So before we begin, just few housekeeping points. Please keep your microphones muted during the session to avoid any background noises. And please do write your comments and your questions in the chat, which is really helpful for us to organize our future sessions. And this session will be recorded for attendance and learning purposes. And in the end, we'll be having a quick group photo, which is essential for marking your attendance. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Most of you know that Dr. Zafi Sharhan Sayed is an AI expert, and he has an extensive experience in artificial intelligence and machine learning. He holds PhD from Cardiff University, UK, and throughout his work, Dr. Zafi focuses on enabling people to use AI tools effectively, responsibly, and productively in the real-world context. So Dr. Zafi will now guide us throughout the session on automation with Gemini Gems. Please feel free to write down your questions, and we will be addressing them in our Q&A segment. So Dr. Zafi, the floor is yours, sir.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. So let's just get started with the session. I believe my screen should be visible to everyone. So as we get started, let's sort of recap what we've done over the past couple of sessions. Is that we've sort of looked into automation, and we've looked into case studies from different perspectives, from different cohorts. And for example, in the last session, we looked at how we could automate stuff using gems, which are sort of experts, bespoke experts that we can create in Gemini. Now, this time around, we want to cycle back into gems, but we also want to look into how we can create good prompts that can be used in gems in order to get our desired results. So as a reminder, this session is part of the AI capacity building initiative from Adaptex. And this course has 3 tracks, so it caters for 3 cohorts. The first one is the students cohort, the second one is the education workforce cohort, and the third is healthcare professional cohorts. Now, given that there are 3 cohorts, the course has been designed in a way that all 5 modules cater to that particular cohort. So it's like a bespoke course for each cohort. Now, before we begin to use GEMS, let's sort of look into some of the fundamentals of AI, and this is for the benefit of those who may be joining us for the first time. So if we were to define AI, artificial intelligence, we can think of it as a software that relies on identifying patterns in data, and then using those patterns, it makes predictions or generate contents. So in some ways, it may seem intelligent, and it is, but it doesn't really represent human thinking. It's essentially learning from data mostly in an unsupervised manner. So some of the outcomes from AI would be very different from what a human needs to think at. So AI is different from traditional automation. For example, traditional automation exists, and they mostly rely on the if, then, and what should be the outcome. So, for example, if a certain condition exists, then a certain action needs to take place. And what this means is that we need to know what conditions would occur. We need to know a priori what are the events that can occur so that we can program in, hard code in the actions that needs to take place. What this means is that the outcomes would always be fixed. Now, this may seem like a good idea when we know all possible conditions, but what if something occurs that's not that we are previously unaware of? The system just would not work. Uh, AI based automation is slightly different in the sense that it is data driven. So, the idea here is that the AI agent would be analyzing data continuously, trying to identify patterns, and then it would adapt its output. So, let's say if an event occurs where which has not been known previously, the data driven automation would be able to cater to that. An example of that could be, let's say, we want to create an autonomous vehicle that can drive us from point A to point B on the highway. Now, of course, on the highway, different events can occur. Perhaps there is repair going on the road, or someone is driving erratically. We wouldn't want rule based systems to work there because they just would not be able to adapt to these unexpected situations. So, in those examples, in those cases, we actually would prefer data driven automation. Now, in terms of artificial intelligence, if you recall, I said that we could use AI to make predictions, but we can also use AI to generate content. And that's because there are two fundamentally different types of artificial intelligence. The first one is predictive AI, where the idea is to make predictions, as the name suggests. And the way this works is that the AI would learn patterns from the data. It would identify how events have been predicted in its training data, and then it will leverage that data in order to make further predictions. For example, a case study is spam detection. We all receive spam in our email, but whatever email service provider you're using, it would do a very good job in sending spam to the spam folder. And that's because someone went through the process of annotating data, which emails are spam and which are not. And on the basis of that, your email service provider would have trained an AI model. Other example also exists. For example, Google search results or search results on YouTube. If you're looking for a video and you like that video, you watch that video, YouTube would actually recommend you a video which would be very similar to what you just watched, and it's quite likely that you'd continue watching that. So predicted AI works great, and it actually makes our life easier in many ways. Now, there's another type of AI which is called as generative AI. The idea here is that the AI would still analyze data, but it would now analyze data from the perspective of creating new content or generating new content. This is something which is really useful, and you would have seen this becoming more and more popular over the last couple of years. Prime example include chatbots or chat assistants like Gemini or ChatGPT, which we use to ask questions which we'd previously just do a Google search for. Now, this type of AI, the generative AI, can generate a variety of things. For example, it can generate text, as we've seen with these chat assistants, but they can also generate images. In some of our previous sessions, we have created infographics based on an idea that we may have. So image generation is certainly possible. We've also looked into music generation, where, for example, with Gemini, we can generate music anywhere between 30 seconds to 3 minutes in duration. In addition to text, for example, we can use these chat assistants in order to generate code for a variety of programming languages just to make our life easier. Now, while AI does a lot of stuff for us, it's important for us to remember that AI at the end of the day is not really the decision maker. It may provide you its understanding, but then you need to be the one who takes the decision. So think of AI as a smart work assistant, which is automating a lot of stuff for you. as much as you want to, and so that you can use your time more productively. So AI is like a helper. You ask it to do something, it would draft a reply, or if it's a really long document, it would probably summarize it, or it could structure and organize information. But at the end of the day, if you're using AI, even the draft that is produced, you have to be the one that owns the draft. So the simple AI work loop follows this protocol where we provided AI an input. This input could be a question that we ask it. It could be a document that we provide to the AI and then ask it to summarize it or perform some action on the document. The AI would create a draft. So by draft, I mean any reply that the AI produces is essentially its draft. And at the end of the day, it should be reviewed by whoever is using that AI tool. And this review step is mandatory in most cases. And once it is reviewed and we find that it's acceptable to us and we are willing to own it, we can just consider that the draft produced by the AI is now the final usable version. Now, like I said, there are a variety of tools that are available that leverage artificial intelligence. And in fact, I would say that every month there is something new, a new feature which is introduced to these new tools. In terms of chat assistants, I would say the most popular chat assistants are Gemini and ChatGPT, and they try to outdo each other in terms of features. So there's, like I said, a new feature in either of the tools every month or every few weeks. Uh, but beyond chat assistants, there are other tools as well. So, for example, in the Google workspace, one can integrate AI into Google Docs or Google Presentations, or, for example, Gmail. In terms of document analysis, Notebook LM, a product from Google, is just brilliant. If you want to, for example, understand a variety of documents, a large array of documents, Notebook LM is what you should go for. And it would, for example, generate podcasts, it would generate infographics, or even a slide deck. Now, the traditional tools for slide decks are Canva and Gamma, through which you can use AI as your assistant as you create presentations. But these days, Notebook LM can do the same as well. Now, even though there are a variety of tools, at the end of the day, you have to be responsible for the outcome from these tools, and that needs to be guided by whatever is the institutional policy of where you study at or where you work at. Now, even though most of us would already be using chat assistants like ChatGPT or Gemini for quite a while, we often feel that we do not get the desired response. It may feel that AI is unreliable, where sometimes we get a good response and at other times we get not so good response. This may cause frustrations as well. So the idea is that in this session, we want to look into how we can try to guide AI so that it gives us a good response in a more consistent manner, a response that's not hit and miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Or, for example, a response that seems to be correct, but when we go and review it, it's actually quite gibberish. And obviously, we don't want that. Or, for example, AI is creating a response, creating a draft, but then we need to spend so much time editing it, reviewing it, that we might as well not have asked AI. Now, the reason for this is indeed there are some models which are better than others, but often what we can do is that ask the AI about what we want in a more clearer manner. We can provide it more context, we can provide clear, structured, and organized instructions. And this typically leads to a good response, and not just good, but it would be consistently good, something that we can eventually trust. And this is where prompting comes in. So just as you would provide clear, helpful instructions to your human assistant, we need to be providing clear instructions to the AI assistant as well, so that the AI knows what what do you desire. So for example, this could be in the form of structured instructions. It could be in the form of the style, the format that AI should create a draft in. For example, if you wanted an output structure which is in the format of bullet points, but you don't tell AI that you want bullet points, it would not know. So idea is to make sure that we get consistently good responses so that you would trust AI as part of your, uh, let's say, assistant as a study buddy if you're a student or in a workspace environment. So it's important to understand what AI can do and what it cannot do. So, for example, AI would not know what your intentions are. Uh, if you're a student, at some point, you probably need to mention to your chat assistant that you're a student. This could be, for example, in the form of context or the role you provided. AI would not know your audience. For example, if you're asking a question for the very first time from the AI, it doesn't really know uh, what its audience is. Is it a university student? Is it a secondary school student? Is it a university professional? Is it a healthcare professional? Or is it someone from, let's say, a business or commerce background? So the idea is that you need to tell AI, otherwise it would just make educated guesses. If you've been talking with the chat assistant, in the background, it is creating its own context. If you've been asking questions which are related with, let's say, studies, then it would probably figure out that you're a student, and then it would try to uh, create its output in a way that adheres to that particular role. So what it would do is it would just fill in the gaps that you don't tell it. And this is where the hit and miss comes in. If it guesses everything correctly, then you'll have a good response. Otherwise, well, the response could be very far from what you actually desire, which is often quite frustrating. So some of the reasons why AI could give weak answers is that our request or the question is just vague. For example, if I ask, explain to me what climate change is, it may appear that this is a very clear request, but actually it's not, right? How detailed should the response be? We never mentioned it to the AI. We did not ask it whether we want to see some evidence. We did not specify whether the evidence should be from where we are located or it should be like a global evidence. So this is fairly vague in terms of instructions that are provided to the AI. Another thing could be the missing context. If you're asking AI about climate change, in what capacity should the AI answer? Should it be in the form of a climate change uh, scientist? Should it be in the form of a climate change practitioner who also works in the health domain? Should the answer be from an economic perspective? So we need to provide the context of from which the AI should answer it from. Another reason that we often find frustrating whilst using these chat assistants is that if you ask a question, they would just go on and on with their answer. So, and we often don't have the time for it, and we eventually just scrap it and we don't really read through the entire thing. So it's often quite useful to specify the length of the output that we want AI to answer. Another important factor is regarding constraints. Because AI has a very large body of knowledge, if you ask it a question from psychology, it would be able to answer it. If you ask it a question from computer science or civil engineering, it would still be able to answer it. So it has a massive set of knowledge. But then what we need to do is to provide it constraints. We need to tell it, all right, well, if I'm going to ask you a question on regarding climate change, answer it from an environmental science perspective, because climate change could have so many different perspectives. And another thing which typically goes wrong is that we just ask it once and we would just assume that it would give us the right answer just with one try. And often this does not work. Just as a human being, you'd probably have to ask it follow-up questions so that you funnel the information out from the AI, just because of the fact that it would have so much information. Now, how do we knowing that what could go wrong, how do we then write instructions to the AI so that it gives us good answers? So there could be variety of ways to figure out what are the ingredients of a good prompt. But let's talk about some fundamental ingredients. And if you follow this approach, more often than not, you will have a very good response. So the first thing is role, where we need to specify who we are and how we would want AI to act. So, for example, if I'm a student, I should probably tell I'm a student and you are my study partner. If I'm a health professional, I would say that answer me from the perspective of a health professional assistant. We then need to specify what the task is. So let's say if we want AI to be a health professional assistant, what do we want it to do? The better instructions we provide, the better would be a result. So we would want to transfer our train of thought to the AI through the task. And then comes the constraints parts, where we try to delimit the knowledge that AI should share with us from the vast array of knowledge that it has. And the final part is the output. When it generates a draft, do you want AI to generate a generic draft? And then you spend, let's say, 30 minutes trying to optimize the draft? Or would you like to tell AI that, hey, this is the ballpark draft that I want you to provide to me so that I spend less time reviewing the draft or correcting the draft? So let's look at some examples of this. So the first thing is role, and it has been shown that if you provide AI the role that it should follow, then it just provides better answers. So, and there are a variety of ways to define roles. I've tried to list some examples over here. You don't need to explicitly follow one particular style. Just see what works best for your use case. So, for example, if I wanted to AI to sort of help me create practice questions, this is something that a student would want to do, then I can write something as, you're an AI assistant tasked with assisting me in creating practice questions. Or, for example, I want to use AI to create infographics, something that Gemini could do. I could say you're an astute assistant that excels at creating infographics. Or, for example, if I want to use AI as a Python programming assistant, I could mention it so that you're an expert Python programmer, or, for example, good at web development. In some cases, it also helps if we provide our role as well as the role of AI. So, for example, I can say, I'm an undergraduate student of computer science, and you are my studying partner whose job is to help me excel at computer science. So, in this part, in this example, I'm not just telling AI that it's my studying partner, but I'm also telling that I am a student. So it would just answer me in that capacity. Now, of course, we could just go in and give it an instruction, but it has, like I said, it has been shown that this actually helps get better responses in a more consistent manner. The second thing is the main crux of what we want AI to do. So this is the task. And the idea here is to convey my train of thought to the AI so that I can automate it. And what we'll do in this session is take an example where, let's say, I am a student and I want the AI to create practice questions for me. So I already had a role over here that it's my assistant who will help me in creating practice questions from lecture notes. So how does that work? So I've provided instructions to the AI, and I've done that in a structured manner. So I've told it where is the data coming from. So the first line could be, you will be provided lecture notes for the course, and then we can write the course title. And what this would do is to sort of delimit the knowledge base of AI. For example, if the course is, again, climate change, then despite the AI having so much knowledge, it would then confine itself to the knowledge base on climate change. If I wanted it to be an engineering subject, for example, signal processing, then I would say the course would be signal processing. This way, AI would limit itself to that particular domain. So once we tell it where we are coming from in terms of the knowledge, we define what needs to be done. So I've said, I want you to read in the lecture notes, digest them, and identify key aspects from the perspective of exam preparation. Now, this is something a student would do, right? If they have lecture notes, they would go through the lecture notes and they would try to learn the concepts, but they would also see which aspects are very important, which could be examined upon. So we're sort of transferring that knowledge from ourselves to the AI. And then comes what we want it to do. Uh, then create 10 MCQs with 4 possible answers, with only one being correct. So we've sort of specified that given the lecture notes, create 10 MCQs. You can obviously change the answers, change the number of MCQs. And we've said there should be 4 options for it. If you wanted some other style of questions to be created, for example, true, false, you could probably go ahead and add it over here. For example, create 10 MCQs, create 10 true, false, and it would still work. So what we're doing here is that we're offloading our task. We're automating what a student would otherwise do themselves, and we're just moving that to the AI. Now, the next part is constraints. So let's pause and think from the perspective of a student. When they want to see how a particular lecture could be examined, they would want to make sure that the exam would just include that particular lecture. It should not be tangential to that particular lecture. So we want to define the scope, we want to define the limitations, and we also want to tell AI what it should and shouldn't do in terms of constraints. So the first constraint we put in is that you must ensure that only topics mentioned and discussed within the lecture notes are taken into consideration for creating practice questions. And the second is, let's say, topics that are related to those in the lecture notes, but they're not really included amongst the topics in the lecture notes should be ignored. Now, this is quite an important constraint because AI has, let's say, all the knowledge about the subject of signal processing. It's a fundamental engineering subject. There's so many books about it, so AI must have trained upon that reading material. So I'm sort of delimiting the scope of what I want AI to work with. And this is necessary for whatever application you're working with. And the final thing is the output. How should the AI create the draft for me? Now, you would note that in this case, I'm not asking the AI for an answer. I'm asking it to automate a set of procedures that a student would do. So I have to be quite clear about how I desire the output to be. So for example, I've said, display each MCQ to the user one by one and ask them to select the most likely correct answer. Uh, we could do more. We could say that also ask them if they want a hint. If they do want it, we can AI should provide them the hint. And at the end, it should count the number of correct answers and display the aggregate score once all practice questions have been answered. So the idea here is that I'm also providing it instructions in a structured way of how the output should be. And once this is done, we can create a prompt on top of it, and then we can feed it to the chat assistant. So let's go ahead and try that out, and you'll see how that works. So what I've done here is these are the same instructions that we saw in Canvas slides. I've made two changes. So the first one is that I've entered the name of the course, so signal processing, just to delimit the knowledge. And after output, I've also written what the input should be, because at the end of the day, where do these lecture notes come from? Now, it's sort of your choice whether you retain these headings or you remove them. In either case, it should be fine. The AI should be able to figure this out. So let's just copy this. Let's go to Gemini, and then let's paste it over here. And we'll just run it. So it understands what we've asked it to do, and it would probably follow through with what it understands to be the instructions. So since we asked it where the input is coming from, it also asked that please upload the file. So let's do that. So I'll just copy this folder so that I can upload a set of lecture notes. And then let's run it. So what it's doing is that it's reading in the lecture notes. It's sort of understanding it. So I use the word digest because it involves so many process within it. So by digest, I actually mean it to analyze it. I want the AI to analyze the lecture notes. I want it to analyze, let's say, if there are figures or graphs within the lecture notes. I want it to identify patterns in the lecture notes. I want it to identify and separate which parts of the lecture notes would be theoretical, which parts would be, let's say, numerical, and what were the outcomes. So I basically asked it to do a lot of this stuff through the term digest. And what we see at the other end is that it creates these questions. And because we asked it to provide these questions one by one, that's what it does. So let's just answer the first one. And let's answer the first one correctly, and the second one we'll just answer incorrectly. So according to the lecture notes, what are the 3 specific steps involved in the process of converting an analog signal into digital? So it's option B. So let's just write option B. And then it goes to other options. Let's ask it for a hint. Provide me a hint. So what we could do is sort of provide follow-up instructions, and that's what it does. Now, the way that AI works is that if you're not really happy with the way it's producing an output, we can come up with follow-up instructions. So for example, this could be one of the ways that we create a practicing assistant, but we could improve it. And let's do that. Let us go here and let's go to the canvas mode. So what I'll do now, I'll say that this approach is not really interactive. And what I would like AI to do is to create a web app, which is more interactive way of creating practice questions. So let's literally write that. This approach is not interactive. Please create a web app that provides an interactive user interface to practice CQs. So what it would do now is that it would start the canvas mode, which has the ability to run code. So in this instance, it's creating a React app. It's a web app, and this is the code for it. And the benefit is that you don't need to run React separately. It would just run within this interface. And this time around, the interface would just be interactive. So for example, we have the same set of questions. And rather than type in your answers, you can just select it. So for example, for the first one, let's just select this option, confirm answer, correct. Let's go to the next question. And let's say this time around, I need a hint. So let's click on, I need a hint. So we'll have a hint which would help us answer this question. Now, the benefit of using AI over here is that you don't need to know web development. You simply need to ask the AI that the current interface is just not interactive, and it would just create an interactive interface. So what this means is that the bar for using AI effectively is just reduced through this approach. Now, let's automate this. Do we really want to be copy pasting this gem over and over again? We do not, right? Because let's say if I have a set of 10 lecture slides, should I be copying this prompt over and over again? That's not really an efficient way to do so. So what we can do instead is to create what's known as gems. So let's go ahead and create gems. And the idea here, it would be that I would copy the prompt once, I would create a gem, I'll tell you in a moment what gem is, and then I can just reuse the gem over and over again. So for that, let's go to gems. And there are a variety of options. And let's just create a new gem. So what gems are like smart assistants where you can provide instructions, and it's like a chat interface where a prompt is already available. So let's go to gem and create a new gem. We can provide it a name. We can call it my, let's say, lecture notes practice assistant. If you want to provide it a description, you can. I'll just write my assistant. And what I'll do now is I can just copy this prompt into instructions once, and I'll provide one more thing. If you remember, last time we saw that if we ask the AI to provide an interactive web app, then it does that, and that's actually more usable than just text-based input. So I'll write that. Create a web app in React that provides an interactive user interface to practice CQs. And that's it. And the benefit of gems is that even though we've created quite a good prompt, if you think it could be improved, you can actually click on this wand. And what this would do is basically ask Gemini to try and update this prompt. So do we really need it? We don't really need it in this case. First, what I'll do, let's just run the gem as it is, and maybe in the next instance we can try to optimize it. Now, do we need a default tool for this? We do, because we're asking it to create a web app, and we would like the web app to run, so we would start it with Canvas. So looks good. Let's save it. And then it would say, do you want to start a new chat to practice this? Let's go ahead and do that. Now, what you would notice is that this name for the gem, it would appear in this section. And if you want, you can just click on it in order to use it. So let's first ask what it is supposed to do. Let's say, what is your purpose? Or, for example, how can you help me? So in this case, it's actually asking, it's actually providing this interface on how it could actually help us. Now, in this case, what it has done is that it has retained the memory. And on the basis of that, it's sort of asking us to answer these MCQs. So what we probably need to go and say is, do not create the web app before the user uploads a document. So this is something which we would have to do. So let's go back here in gems. Let us edit the gem. And let's say, ask the user to upload their lecture notes. And unless the user does that, do not create the web app. Because what we saw previously is that it created the web app and it asked the user to paste the lecture notes. But if the lecture notes exist as a PDF file, the user won't really be able to upload it. Now, let's say I have sort of convinced or conveyed the idea, but I'm not sure if my prompt would work correctly. What I need to do is I can just click on the web, this wand icon. So let's click over here. And what it would do is that it would fill in the instructions. So it would provide it a role. It would provide the purpose and goals. It would provide behavior and rules. So what it would do is it would factor in the things which I asked it not to do. So for example, do not proceed with question generation or web app creation until the notes are provided. So rather than notes are provided, I'll probably say notes are uploaded. And let's go through some of the other instructions. So here we have the creation of 10 MCQs. We have the section on scoring. So this looks good. Let's update this gem. And then let's start the chat with this. So this time around, let's upload the lecture notes. And I'm not going to type in any other instruction because I already provide the instruction once when I was creating this gem. So let's submit. So for example, what we see in this point is that it's not really created the React interface. And what needs to be done is that we need to go back, we need to edit it, and try to identify whether the React part is there. So the React part is indeed there. We just need to probably update this. And let's try to see what we can do in order to make this work. So this is something which needs to be done because AI sort of starts from a random manner, and we have to coerce it into the direction that we want it to take. So perhaps this is the part which is messing with the logic. So I'll just remove that. And let's write a couple of other things. Prompt the user to upload lecture notes. And then create the React web app. So let's update this. Let's create yet another instance. So let's say, what is your purpose? Okay, so this time around, it does say the upload or paste lecture notes for signal processing. So let's upload this. And let's say here are the lecture notes. And it finally does what we needed to do. So we let it create the entire code so that we can then look at the preview. Something went wrong. So let's refresh this. And I'll try to go through the same thing. All right, something seems to be messed up here. Let's create a new chat with the same gem. And let's ask, what's your role? We'll try this one more time. Does it prompt us? It does. Let's upload the lecture. Let's run this. So apparently it's not. So let's give it a hint. Create a React web app for these MCQs. So let's see if it's able to run it properly this time around. Yeah, I mean, third time's the charm. So this time around, it is able to create this web-based interface. But what you would notice is that this did require us to create multiple iterations. We had to go and update the prompt multiple times. And this is something which we would have to do. So the idea is that don't just stop at the first answer. So as it turns out that we actually did need to go through it multiple times, uh, but we already had to discuss that. So often what happens is that AI may or may not be able to give us the desired response on the first try. There is a certain randomness which is built into these AI agents. Uh, and sometimes they could help us get a better answer. On other occasions, they would just require us to go through multiple steps of refinement. So iteration is important. Try to iterate with your prompts, and whichever prompt then works, you can just copy and save it somewhere that you can reuse over and over again. What we may also require to do is to sort of shorten the prompt. If you're providing too much information, we may want to remove it. The idea again is that through this iterations, we want to improve what our output is. So there are some mistakes that you would like to avoid while writing prompt. So if you're writing a really long sentence, try to avoid that. As you saw, what I did was to structure it in a way that there are multiple lines for each thing I wanted the AI to do. Another thing could be that you don't use any format or structure. Just as for a human being, if we provide instructions in a clear structured approach, they would work better. We need to be doing the same thing for the AI. Another thing to avoid is to trust the output blindly. So for example, I had created a prompt, but I had to sanity check that all the options in the web app actually worked correctly. And if you don't do that, what we could have a situation like this. So in the second instance, it did generate the code, but it just did not work. So we have to sanity check that. We also need to be careful about sharing sensitive data. So let's say in this case, our document was a public document, so it's fine to upload it to the AI. But if it's a restricted document, then we may not really want to do that. Another important thing to remember is it doesn't really make sense to expect the AI to be providing a perfect output on the first try. We more often than not have to iterate on it. But once we iterate and we have something in working, then we can go ahead and save it. So we can save the prompt in a text file and then we can use it. Or even better, we can save the prompt and create a gem out of it. So the key takeaways would be that if we are sort of clear about what we want to do, then we are able to create better prompts, clearer prompts, and this would typically reduce errors. Iteration is normal and expected. In our case, we had to iterate 3 times before we actually got something that we like. Uh, Small changes can make a big difference. And there's really no standard way to go through this. But typically, what happens is that the response from these AI models are sensitive to the changes that we make. So even if you're making small changes, we kind of have to sanity check whether the AI is still providing good outputs. But at the end of the day, do remember that you're still responsible for the output. So for example, we created these practice questions. More often than not, AI would be providing the correct answer, but there is a possibility that the answers that it provides are actually incorrect. So we cannot just rely on the AI and say that, hey, I scored 100% in the practice test, but maybe some of the questions were incorrect. Some of the answers were incorrect in the practice test created by AI. So this is it regarding today's session. And even though it was slightly undesired, but hopefully you saw that we do need to iterate over prompting so that we can squeeze out the type of response that we got. So that's it from the perspective of showing you how we could work with prompting. If there are questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zafi, for sharing the insightful session and sharing the strategies to use Gemini. And what makes these sessions unique is that we encounter real-time issues and we learn how to resolve them. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of iteration once again and the common mistakes that most of us need to avoid. So now we are moving to the Q&A segment. We have a question from Asiful, and he's asking the difference between GEMS and Gemini.
So gems are sort of specialized instances within Gemini. Gemini is your very smart chat assistant, but if you want to it to create MCQs over and over again, we don't really want to be pasting the prompt over and over again, and we can just create what a gem is. And the idea is that gem comes preloaded with that prompt that you want to use. So think of gem as a bespoke specialized assistant within Gemini that you can use for repeated tasks.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. As we are moving to the end of the session, I request all of you to please turn on your camera so we can have a quick group photo. Let's wait for a minute so we can have everyone. All right. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join this session. I hope that this session is productive for you. And please do share with your friends and your colleagues so if they can benefit from these sessions. And thank you, Dr. Zafi. And this is the end of the session. And we look forward to meet you in our next session. Thank you, everyone. Have a
All
nice
right.
day.
Bye, everyone.